The Money Media YouTube channel, in the Money Players podcast. My voice is hoarse from yelling at referees. But that's a story for a different podcast. Peter Thomas Fornatale back with you in the Brooklyn Bunker. We've got some big stuff happening in the racing world. Next week is Belmont week. We got you covered here on the In the Money Media Network. We're going to have some great free shows, including our Final Answers broadcast will be right here on the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of our YouTube exclusive content. Also, we've got a special promotion for ITM Plus because we do not have a ton of Naira on the free side. But what we're going to have is a special promotion where if you sign up for ITM Plus for Belmont, you're going to get an extra month included, which means you're going to get the beginning of Saratoga. And these days it's like, significant, right? If you're getting all the Saratoga in July, you're getting a lot of Saratoga. So we're encouraging people to do that in themoneypodcast.com/plus. What will you get? Well, one of the things you're going to get is daily analysis from one of the sharpest horse players in the game. He joins me now. He's Nick Tammaro. Nick, how are things?
Doing good, Pete. Good to be with you and excited to talk a little Belmont.
A personal note first. When Belmont gets back to New York City, do you expect yourself to be able to be in the regular rotation as you were for many years? I miss our Friday nights at Peter Luger.
Boy, I'm going to try. Yeah, it's going to be tough to stay away. I imagine it's going to cost quite a bit more than it used to in terms of going. But yeah, no, that was my favorite trip of the year. So it's hard to imagine it back downstate and not going. So I'm definitely planning on it.
We'll pull some strings. Maybe we'll try to do an ITM thing out there one of those days too. But that's getting way ahead of ourselves. We're talking next year. This year, it's going to be great. We'll have you covering daily. I'll be doing some special stuff. We always pull out the stops for these Triple Crown races. And then Saratoga as well. If you're up for it, we'd love to have you back doing your Nick's Notebook, which has been so popular the last few years. Good. I see you nodding. We'll take that. We'll take that as that.
Oh, yeah.
As good as gold.
Absolutely. No, happy to do it.
I want to do a little bit of data diving too this year with, between Race Lens and some of these AI tools we have now. I think like it might be a good year. I haven't done in a couple of years, like a full on deep dive trainer stat kind of dive. That might be something really fun to include. We'll do a little bit of that for free for sure with our Race Lens partners, but I think I might want to do something behind the paywall for that as well. That'll pub in July. Obviously, it'll be the beginning of the meet, so folks can get that as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. We encourage folks to join us. Speaking of things we want folks to participate in, next week, Belmont week on the Friday, the ITM Horse Player Tour returns. This is the best way to try to win a Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge seat, in my opinion. If folks don't know the rules, they're very straightforward. It's a regular feeder to the BCBC, so that's one way you can win. $20 an entry. You can play up to 3. So max of $60 a week. It could be as little as 20. And the other thing that we love about it, the house cut goes to charity. It's back Friday before Belmont. We'll probably do, weather permitting, we're going to probably do an all Saratoga at Belmont Friday card. You can sign up to play at horseplayers.com. You'll be hearing a lot more messaging about this between now and then, but I just want to put that bug in the ear, folks. It's coming back and it's going to be a lot of fun. One other thing I'll just plug, just because it's if you want the details on ITM Horse Player Tour, In the Money Plus, everything we do, we got a free email account. And if you go to inthemoneypodcast.com/email, you'll see everything we've got cooking. Okay, enough business. Time to get down to this race, which is really shaping up. I think it's fair to say to be a pretty interesting affair. We've got the rematch from the Derby. We've got some other interesting angles. I find it very interesting that in the international betting so far, Nick, Renegade is like the runaway choice. Sub 2-1 right now at the books, 15-8. I certainly get it. Todd Pletcher's success in this race. If you look back at the PP cuts of his 4 Belmont winners, they all have the same layoff, and their PP cuts do not look dissimilar from Renegade. Renegade looks pretty darn good as far as that lens goes. Obviously, it's a different field. And it ain't an easy field, but do you believe he deserves his place at the top of the market? And should there be this much between him and the rest of the field for this year's Belmont Stakes?
Yes and no. Yes, he should be favored at this point, but no, there shouldn't be a big disparity between he and anybody else. I think, I guess part of it is that The public will struggle to find a second choice in this race. I guess there's a world in which Golden Tempo will probably be the second choice. It's awfully hard to bet him for somebody like me. I suppose there are people out there who will, but taking 4 or 5 to 1 on a 23 to 1 shot who got an enormous pace setup seems like a fool's errand
in a slow race.
In a super slow race. Yeah, I'll be avoiding it. I've already I've drawn a lot of ire from people about some of my post-race Renegade comments. And, I think a lot of it is the first quarter mile of that race is sort of eye candy for people that want to make excuses. What happened to him in the opening furlong of that race obviously is not ideal. However, he was going to be at the back of the pack anyway. He was going to be coming from way off of it. And I think to focus, if you want to take 2 elements of his Derby trip, and this really wasn't the question you asked me, but
this was next on the list, so keep going.
So if you take 2 elements of his Derby trip and you say, okay, you have the first quarter mile, and then you have the next 8 furlongs. The first quarter mile, obviously, and it really wasn't even the first quarter, Pete. It was the first 1/8. He got roughed up a little bit on the inside. He was breaking from the rail, not the most ideal spot. I get it. And roughed up a little bit. Never really steadied, never really lost any ground. Did get hip checked a little bit. We've seen it happen. There are horses in this race that lost position badly. Golden Tempo steadied shortly out of the gate, angled in. Nobody really brought that up. He was going to be towards the back of the pack anyway. He got an enormous pace to run at after that. I mean, he got an incredibly good setup. He got held up a little bit on the turn, which probably was to his benefit because you wanted to be making as late a move as possible.
The last move was the winning one. Yeah.
The last move was going to be the winning move in that race. And so he made the second to last move. And I think it's important to really keep an eye on that as something that is pivotal in keeping in the mix. So with that said, I think there are horses that had negative trips relative to how the pace set up that should be getting a little bit more action and maybe narrow some of that gap between Renegade and them.
That's a perfect segue to Chief Wallabee, I think, just to button up what you were saying. Yeah, I agree. I'm not going to get overly concerned about what happens to a closer in the first few furlongs of a collapse race.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, where we might disagree, before we pivot to Wallabee, where we might disagree is, I think, had Irad not been drawn down the 1, just because of how much confidence he had in his horse and how good that horse was, even though he hadn't done it previously, I think he probably would have preferred to try to use a little positional speed and be more of a mid-pack closer on the day. And I do think the rail maybe denied him that opportunity a little bit. Does that sound crazy to you as somebody who does not believe that the rail was any kind of issue for him?
Do you think he would have won if he showed a little bit more positional speed? So I'll give you this as a hypothetical. Commandment was basically at the back of that first group, 5 lengths in advance of the deeper closers. You put Renegade where Commandment was. Do you think he would have won?
I don't. Not the way it played out. Yeah, not the way it played out. I mean, it's different. Yeah.
Right. And I think and the hypotheticals obviously are fun, but they're also kind of they're difficult to really reach a conclusion. The thing is, to me, the one thing you're supposed to take away from this race with regards to Renegade and everybody else is not so much the traffic, the crowding, the bumping, the anything. It's the pace. The pace of this race was brutal. We saw how it played out in terms of the Preakness and what we saw as a more moderate pace because there was a bit of an overcorrection by some of the jockeys, I think, going into the Preakness, knowing that they had gone so quickly in the Derby. And I think you're supposed to focus individually on the pace, and the pace in this race made it so that it was just brutal for anyone who was too close. And the fact that Renegade, Ocelli, and Golden Tempo were as far back as they were was obviously to their benefit.
Ultimately helped them. And then to get back to the other point, in a slow race, I agree with you. I think very often, more than people like to admit, what I call race flow very much related to the pace, it trumps trips, it trumps a lot of things. And then when you're looking at a race that has that classic, what you'd call fast, slow shape, you don't want the closers out of that. You want
Correct.
The horses that were close. The horse who was closest, who comes back to compete here, it was Chief Wallabee. By just a length or two, right? I mean, the Commandment wasn't too far behind him, but I think he was about 5 back.
Emerging Market was close too.
Yeah, he was, but behind, was Wallabee ahead of him? I thought so.
I think Emerging Market was ahead of him early, but then an Emerging Market did make an early move. I mean, if we're talking about horses that were negatively impacted by the pace. I mean, I think Emerging Market and Chief Wallabee are they're probably at the head of the class.
And they're
then
both in the betting here. Wallabee, though, in addition to that trouble, then had a little bit of trouble getting run. It was stymied for run at what I thought was a critical stage.
He was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think he was going to win, but I think he was going to go a lot closer with a clean trip and with better dynamics. I do think he not easily could have won, but I think he would be a prime win candidate. In this theoretical world, horse players talk about where we wish this could happen, where you get to run the race again. But I think from an analysis point of view, it's smart to think about, okay, well, if the race was run 100 times, how would it have played out? There are many scenarios where the race is run 100 times where Wallabee wins. It's harder for Emerging Market with the lost shoe and all that it's harder for me to say that about him. I guess what I'm trying to say is I like Chief Wallabee in the race. He is the current second choice internationally. How serious of a contender is he by your reckoning?
Yeah, I think he's going to be the en vogue horse for sure. He's going to be probably bordering on overbet relative to where he should be bet. But with that said, he's a major win candidate. I liked him in the Derby. I bet him in the Derby. I didn't love his trip, obviously. I don't know how much better he would have finished than he did had he gotten a cleaner run of it. What I would like to see them do with this horse long term is show a little bit more confidence in him and stop acting like he needs to save ground and cut corners and do things like that, because I really don't think he needs that advantage. I think he needs to be more forward. I think they need to utilize a little bit more speed. Right now, I mean, looking at who the probables are, if Potente were to go, if Chip Honcho were to go, if Talk to Me Jimmy were to go, those are three sort of legitimate speed horses. And then he and Emerging Market sit off of them. So what we're looking at is what should almost certainly be an appreciably slower paced race, which you would think he would get more involved in that, and that would be to his benefit. But I mean, obviously with Bill Mott and with the documented trouble that he had in the final quarter mile of the Derby, I think it's pretty safe to say he'll go off the second choice. I know I said at the beginning of the video, it might be hard for people to find a second choice, but I think as you think about it a little bit more, it probably will be him. The question then becomes, what's a fair price? Right? Do you like him at 4-1? Do you like him at 5-1? You're probably not going to get Renegade at much more than 2-1 or 5-2, somewhere in that range, even in a 12-horse race. And in that case, you're probably looking at a 7-2 plus type number on Chief Wallabee, and you've just got to determine if that's good enough.
I'm seeing 11-2 internationally now. How is that buy, sell, or hold for you?
That would be a buy. 5.5-1 would be fine for me. I think my threshold on him is probably somewhere around 9-2.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. I think that makes sense. I think that makes absolute sense. I'll also point out early, this could be another race where you see some strangeness in the markets between the win pool and other pools. Because I do think Golden Tempo is going to take a ton of money on all the different storylines and the fact that there is a somewhat compelling narrative about him as a horse who was playing catch up, who, according to his trainer, who is usually straight about these things, continues to improve. So I think there's enough reasons. I think there's a real chance Golden Tempo in the win pool would be the second choice, even if Chief Wallabee is the second choice in pools where more sophisticated horse players are playing. Do you buy that hypothesis at all?
Yep, I think it's totally reasonable based on what we've seen in both the Derby and Preakness. I believe it. And one thing, we know is that there are limitations on what the CAWs can do in New York, which is good. So it actually means the recreational money is going to have a bigger impact. And these are the races where the recreational money has a bigger impact to begin with. So yeah, that's a good thing. I mean, I think for everybody else, if Golden Tempo is the second choice in the win pool, I mean, it obviously becomes a far more appealing win pool because, I mean, he doesn't have a popsicles chance in Hayden.
You're more negative than me.
He has absolutely no chance in this race.
I'm against him. I'm against him.
I already said last week, I don't remember where it was, I'll need to be resuscitated if he wins.
For me, the fact that the hands he's in, how progressive he is, and the fact that, as you point out, there could be some speed horses coming out of the woodwork here. I see a world in which he wins, but he's 10-12-1, and he's going to be half that. That's how
Sure, exactly, right. And it's nothing against Cherie or the connections or anything like that. Cherie's done an outstanding job. Jose Ortiz rode a brilliant race last time. It's just a matter of understanding in context what happened, right? And that you basically they needed like runner on the turn and river to get there, and got everything. They got this unbelievably clean trip after the first 10 strides in a collapse race, which almost never happens in the Derby. He got outside when he needed to, and he still got up by by a hair in the last jump. So hey, I mean, look, they'll never take away from him that he's the Derby winner, but he looks a lot more like Giacomo or I mean, I don't really want to throw the Rich Strike label on him. That seems unfair. But Rich Strike actually came back and ran a couple of decent races later on. But
He did.
yeah, he's a. I'll tell you what. The only thing that would appeal to me more is if this was a 1.5 mile Belmont, because he'd probably take even more money and he'd have even less of a chance.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. 1.5 miles, yeah, they're going to go slower earlier. Stamina is not going to come into play in the same way, or that late burst. We basically agree. I'm just a little less cynical, but there's no doubt, as a horse player, these are the kind of horses you're supposed to bet against. Sure. Let's talk about some of the other contenders in here. Let's go right to Commandment, another horse that I think will be, odds wise right now is right in there. Wallabee 11-2, Tempo 5s, Commandment 6s. How do you assess his chances?
I actually like his chances, and I think he is going to be the misunderstood horse in this race. And I think there are going to be people that probably take a more negative opinion of his Derby run than it deserves. I do believe that he expended more energy in the opening half mile of the Derby than he needed to. I was concerned when they announced it that Luis Saez would be a bad fit for this horse. And I think Luis is an outstanding rider, obviously one of the top riders in the game, but Luis fits a certain profile a lot better than other riders do. And Commandment's not in that profile. So Luis is at his best when he's riding a horse with speed that needs to be kind of cajoled along early to get into the mix. And that's not Commandment. Commandment needed to be allowed to settle and make one run in here. So I actually think he will have a different rider in the Belmont. I think he actually has a pretty decent chance of turning things around, and he might be the one that slips under the radar price-wise. Just looking at pace figures for what he produced relative to what he had prior, this was a race where he had to go 134, 128, 122 in his first 3 running lines, and he can't do that. Like that's not going to work for him. This is a horse that in his prior start got up by a nose at Gulfstream and went 106, 104, 108. The time before that went 117, 117, 115. So obviously my point with it is he expended way too much energy in the opening half mile. Yeah. So if he's able to settle in, mid-pack towards the back of the pack with some speed horses set up in here, I think he actually has a pretty decent chance. And if we're going to get somewhere around 10-1 on him, he becomes a really interesting play.
He is one who's maybe a candidate to get a little bit lost. The bookies are keeping him pretty safe, I'd say, at 6-1. You were citing those Timeform US pace figures. That's a tool that you and I both rely on. Timeform US and DRF, they obviously are going to have great info folks are going to want to check out when it comes to this year's Belmont Stakes. How did those figures compare? I'm just curious if you have it at a glance, don't go crazy, but what his pace line looked like on Timeform compared to Emerging Market and Wallabee.
No, that's a good one. Yes. So, I have it close.
Gotcha.
So what it will do is, Emerging Markets looks really good. Emerging Market used in terms of wanting to bet him back. Emerging Market went 144, 135, 123. So, I mean, you're talking about a 140 plus opening pace figure at 1.25 miles in what ultimately becomes a collapse race. I mean, yeah, did he downline badly? Of course he did, but they went super fast early. They all downlined. So with regards to the majority of the pace horses, obviously Renegade went slow early. So did Golden Tempo. And then Chief Wallabee was more of his was a little bit not quite as bad early. He was 136, 129, 121. I guess the problem with Chief Wallabee is we don't know what his most effective running style is, right? Because his most complete race was probably the Fountain of Youth, and he was somewhat close. They've just been dragging him back as much as possible in his last couple of route starts, which I don't love. I want them to let him get a little bit more involved, especially in a slower paced race. And in the future, these handicap races, these later season 3-year-old races, they're all going to be run at a decidedly slower pace than any of the Triple Crown races. So I'd like to see them go back to that kind of strategy in here and let him get a little bit more involved.
That is interesting. It runs contrary to my original point, saying I thought he was the clearest move up. Really looking at that pace line, he ran a bit more efficiently than those other two. I still think, given the way he finished, given the other trouble that he had, he's still the one I want to take out of it. But to your point,
Yeah.
taking like 4-1 on him if you're going to get 8s and 10s ultimately on Commandment and Emerging Market might not be the shrewdest move in the world. So I will reconsider that. Right now, though, at these prices, 11-2 Wallabee, 6-1 Commandment, 7-1 Emerging Market, I still feel okay nominating Wallabee as the most interesting of that bunch. Emerging Market and losing the shoe, how much does that mean to you? I mean, the other very obvious thing with Emerging Market is just what, the experience he'll have gained from this. I mean, I see him as a contender. He's going to be on, I think all three of these horses are going to be on my tickets.
Yeah, I think he's a main contender. I think he moved it. He ran an inefficient race relative to how it unfolded. He moved too early. Flavien Prat has won a lot of meaningful races by being aggressive. This was not an aggressive jockey's race, and that's part of the reason why the Ortiz brothers went 1-2. To be perfectly honest, those are guys that are willing to take their horses back, and it worked out perfectly. So this was a situation where you wanted to be a little bit off of it. Yes, he moved too early. I think he's a significant bet back. I think the only worry that I might have is I'm not really sure how much he wants to go 1.25 miles. But with that said, he's been 1 mile and 3/16 and 1.25 miles in his last 2 starts. I think Chad's focus based on that last workout is really making sure he's conditioned properly and they can get as much stamina into him in terms of fitness. So I think he's a major win candidate, and I would say he's on the short list of horses to bet intra-race at 10-1 or so.
We have a few more horses to talk about. We'll rapid fire them here so we get out on time. We got about 4 minutes, I'd say, before we turn back into a pumpkin. You mentioned Talk to Me Jimmy as a potential runner here. I was not seeing him in the betting. Is that news that I missed or the bookies have missed?
I just got it off the contender list on BelmontStakes.com.
Gotcha. Well, I'm sure that's up to date. So that's
there isn't a Belmont section on DRF yet. I'm sure they'll get that up this week.
Do you give him Talk to Me Jimmy any chance, or more of a pace factor? Or how
he would just be a pace factor. I think, isn't he a New York bred? There's probably a New York bred race they should be considering. And I would actually like one less speed horse in this race, given who I like. Yes. I know I'm usually the guy that's like, get more pace in there, get more speed. But I actually wouldn't mind if he doesn't go, especially if a horse like Potente goes. Because I would imagine if Bob is sending Potente, he's planning on him going forward.
Give me your thoughts on Growth Equity.
I think Growth Equity is probably blossoming into a nice horse. I think this is a little bit more than he can handle, just in terms of the jump up in class and the competition. But I also wonder how far he wants to go. I do think the 1.25 miles is within his scope, but he would be a fringe player. I mean, he seems like a 20-1 shot plus.
When we did our Derby draft, you had Chip Honcho among your list. I'm hoping I can grimly hang on. It may not work out though. I think I need Golden Tempo to hit the board, but hopefully he's good enough to do that.
Who has the lead?
Yeah.
Who has the lead? You?
I have the lead for that one. So it's okay. But basically, like if Renegade wins and Golden Tempo's off the board, I lose to Michelle again, which I don't want to have happen. But what about Chip Honcho? Is he a serious contender?
Not really. Honestly, I'm a little surprised Steve is pressing on with him. I think he's a really good candidate for a cutback, but maybe they're hoping that it could be a moderately paced race. It's also a bad year to have a 3-year-old sprinter with Englishman and Crude Velocity in the mix. Although I see Crude Velocity is not a certainty to go to the Woody Stevens. He might go elsewhere. 6 Speed is going to the Woody Stevens too, and he might turn out to be a very nice sprinter as well. But Chip Honcho looks like, he has a little bit of the, I really don't want to make this comparison, but you could see like a little shades of Gunrunner as a 3-year-old in him, because people hear that and they're like, Gunrunner was a champion. Gunrunner wasn't that great an early season 3-year-old.
Right.
He was a more accomplished horse, obviously, than Chip Honcho, but he was kind of an unfinished product, and it took Steve a little bit of time to get him where he wanted to. And maybe he envisions that with him, but at this point, I would be looking for second tier type races with him. But I applaud anybody for trying.
Potente, we've talked about a few times. Anything more than a pace factor?
I would have thought Bob would have tried the Preakness with him rather than this. But I think he's another one that probably could be better down the line. This is just a little too tough.
we're not going down this rabbit hole, but low key, even Bob Baffert doesn't seem to like the 2-week turnaround these days based on some of the decisions he made with the horses that ran on Derby Day 26. Ocelli, I'll get in trouble for not having mentioned him to this point, but I mean, I kind of feel like it's like everything we said about Golden Tempo goes double for him. Is that fair?
Yeah, he needs to go to a maiden race. Just let him break his maiden and move on with it. But he's a fun horse, and the connections are obviously having a blast. But there are better closers in this race, and I'd be hard pressed to see him in the exacta.
Power Shift, recent maiden winner, has been mentioned as a candidate for this race. Certainly interesting if he turns up. Can he hit the board?
The most interesting thing would be if they do what they're supposed to do, which is make him ensure that there's pace. And Mike Repole has an unofficial rabbit after the campaign he went on last year about Sierra Leone, right? So, I mean, but look, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what he should do. Power Shift should ensure that there's pace in this race, and you're not taking Power Shift out of his game by having him do it. They're putting Saez on him, so I imagine they're expecting him to go forward. He's a really interesting horse. I mean, he handily outworked Renegade last week. They say Renegade's not the greatest horse in the morning. I've watched some of his workouts. He's not a superstar in the morning, but he's not bad. And Power Shift is really good in the morning. He made him look somewhat ordinary in that workout. I think Power Shift may end up being a nice horse. My one worry is that he might need Lasix because he has run 2 big races with Lasix and 1 not very big race without it. But it could also be a lightly raced horse thing. So I'm not going to be surprised if Power Shift ends up being a really nice horse and even hanging around for a piece of this.
The rabbit idea is hilarious, but Repole, he's sharp and he understands a key rule in business and sports. If you can't beat him, join him. So if he ends up
absolutely. Well, and the other thing is that, you do have the element, and I'm not just like wordsmithing the thing, but you have the argument that doing that is not going to take Power Shift out of his best run.
Right. Sometimes team tactics are not sacrifice one for the other. It's let's give both chances the best chance to win. I mean, the classic example from the Breeders' Cup, I'm dating myself a bit, but I just can't think of a better example of Highland Reel and Found against, I heard people giving Castellano a hard time for his ride on Flincher. Well, what do you want him to do? You go after this one, that one's going to win, or you do what he does and the other one has too much rope. But he was I still contend he was in kind of an impossible position.
I agree.
All right, that was an unscheduled diatribe to a 7-year-old turf race. We will talk about the other horse I'm tracking for this race, and that's Otino. What do you think of him?
He looks like he could probably clunk up for a piece of it. More than that would be hard to believe, but I'm glad he got second in the Bluegrass. Had a nice exacta.
Usable though, it sounds from your description, usable at 25-1 underneath.
Sure, yeah, usable in the Super for sure. Even maybe getting into the try because he's going to be ridden. Dylan. I think Dylan Davis is going to ride him. I think he's going to be ridden with one intention, which is to get in the money.
So just to give you the prices on those that we just ran through very quickly, I don't have one for Talk to Me Jimmy. I'm imagining it would be big-ish, but Growth Equity 10s, Chip Honcho 11, Potente 16, Ocelli 25, and the same for Power Shift and Otino. There you have it. Very early look at the Belmont Stakes. We're going to have so much more for you next week. You can follow all of Nick's stuff on the In the Money Plus side. Remember, you get that free month if you join now. So go ahead and sign up inthemoneypodcast.com/plus. Check out our Final Answer show. That's the big thing I'm tracking on the free side here. But there's also going to be a cool top 5 Belmont video that JK and I did dropping very soon. Lots of other stuff. Subscribe to the channel. Let us know down in the comments who your early idea of the winner for the Belmont Stakes is. And even if you just want to comment and say, I'm going to wait for the PPs, please put that comment in there. Every one helps move that algorithm along. Appreciate you, Nick. Thank you so much for coming by. Thanks to everybody out there for watching on the In the Money Media YouTube channel. Perfect. That was good.